From the study of the 10 Sefirot with Rabash, we will learn from the study of the 10 Sefirot, part 4, Inner Observation, Chapter 3, Item 50. Before we begin to study, we love talking about the main topic in the lesson before us.
Here too, during the ascent, there's this order that these Patzufim ascend, the records keep adding on to the Patzufim that are refined. So one affects the other, and they reach the Peh of Rosh in an organized manner, in a very specific way that brings us, already now, in potential, the next future Patzuf. Let's say after Galgalta, according to the way the records work out between them, we can already know what will be born, what the Patzuf of Ab is, and in what it's different, and it's completely different than Galgalta. Galgalta bestows its Keter, and Ab receives its Chokhmah. So, how could it be that one begets the other? Through this refinement and cascading and relation between these records that come now, except for that in general, Ab receives from Ein Sof through Galgalta its intensity from the Yud of Havaya of Ein Sof. We shouldn't forget that all the Patzufim, all the worlds, everything there in the personal Sefirot, doesn't matter. All the Yud, all the first Hey, all the Vav, all the last Hey, they're all connected to that first Havaya from Ein Sof. And from there, they receive forces and their character. In Galgalta, there's no character of Ab. A monkey can give birth to a person. But in order for a person to be born, in that previous monkey, there had to be some kind of impulse and a revelation of a new record. That it's not the point of Yud, but it's actually Yud. And then it begets something new. Suddenly, from mother monkey comes something called a man. It's new discernments, and not that this thing developed into that. There's no development here. Why? Because we measure. We think, according to Darwin, that matter develops. It doesn't. The light that works in matter reveals a new degree in the matter. Just like from phase 1, phase 2 can never be born out of it. But the light works in phase 1, and it makes phase 2 in phase 1. And it's not that the matter of phase 1 inverted and became phase 2. That can't happen. We never see it. And we also, scientists can't discover this, and they won't, that there's something in between one species and the next. That can't be. But that one species begets the next one, that yes, but it's a new spirit that works in it, that comes from above, meaning a new record. That's why Ab, in order to be born, it actually receives a feeding from the Yud of Havaya that is in Ein Sof. And we think it's, this is a Patzuf, this is a Patzuf, this is a Patzuf. Malchut, with a screen, the light receives, rejects. No. It's different Patzufim in their nature, because each one of them is, it takes its foundation, its essence, from that Havaya and Ein Sof, and it belongs to it. That's why all the Patzufim of Chokhmah, they all belong to phase 1 of Ein Sof. All the Patzufim of Bina belong to the Hey of Ein Sof. That's how it is. That's why it's very important here about the records that they remain after the refining of the Patzuf. that in Galgalta itself, there couldn't be that something will be born that Ab comes out of it. It's only a preparation. In Chokhmah of Keter, there's a preparation that Keter of Chokhmah will be born.
Now we will study together the study of the 10 Sefirot with Rabash.
So I'll start from item 50. It was clarified that after the departing of the record from the vessel, since the light came, let's say the light of Binah, through an allegory, and the light of Ab in the record won't rise, so Ab remained below. The gap between the light and the record, and between the vessel and the record, the refined one, and the vessel is now called the light, the coarse light of the record. So we find that the refined light of that record ascended. He calls it the seventh type. The coarse light in the record is now called the inner part of the vessel. So it's the eighth light of the record. And know that the type of coarse light in the record that remained in the vessels of the males of the second expansion took place. And the light of the record is now called the refined light in the record. And from it, the lights of the males of the second expansion came, as the Ari said. So what's written here? Look again, look inside. You should know that the coarse light in the record, let's say we'll learn about phase 4 now and we'll understand it better. Now in the record that was in the vessel of Malchut on the degree of Keter, the male vessels were made on the degree of Keter of the second expansion in Parzuf Ab. Parzuf Ab, that where there was Keter of clothing, so it will be in which vessels? Of the light of Keter in the vessel of Keter. That's why it has to be a record within the vessel. The light of that record is now called the refined light in the record, and from it, the lights of the males of the second expansion. So in the light of Chokhmah, the light of Keter in the vessel of Keter. Did you get that? I'll give you another example. If I'm speaking about phase 3, what light was in phase 3? The light of Chokhmah in the vessel of Chokhmah. But in the females, it's the opposite. There's the light of Chokhmah in the vessel of Keter. We'll learn that tomorrow. Is that clear till now? So we just finished now, and we should start item 51. When we talk about the vessel, what does the word vessel mean? That it receives. Sometimes we ask, what is the matter of the vessel? We say, it's complex. One is coarseness, called receiving in order to receive. 2 is a screen that's formulating to receive only in order to bestow. 3, that this screen still receives reflected light. From these 3 became a vessel that can receive direct light. So what's the question? It means that Malchut is called receiving in order to receive. If Malchut is not called receiving in order to receive, why do you need to make a screen to overcome? So first you must receive in order to receive, that's the matter. That's called screen and coarseness. There's coarseness, so you make a screen. Together, by that screen you get reflected light. And everything together is called a vessel that receives the direct light. It's only matter that this vessel is made of. So let's start 51. Here he wants to clarify the record of clothing that remained in the Malchut. 51. The ninth type is the record of the light of Malchut. What the Ari explains here. You should know that this record is the seventh type called refined light, meaning that there's no discernment of a vessel. It already has an expansion, as written above in 43, that the record on behalf of the extension was lost in Malchut, meaning the phase of the coarse light from that record, which is the eighth type of the record, is it extends reflected light. But the refined light in it remains without a vessel. That rose because of that above its vessel, meaning above the Yesod. It's difficult. We're lacking explanation of what he's saying here. So look again. He brings the ninth type is the record of the light of Malchut. We learned that Malchut does not lay a record. Why? Since all the records are direct light, and since Malchut, there is no direct light, Malchut doesn't leave a record. But the record that remains in the vessel of Yesod shines on the vessel of Malchut. So what's written here? Look. The ninth type is a record of the light of Malchut that the Ari explains here. Know that this record is from the seventh type mentioned above, called the refined light. What is the refined light? Light that remains of direct light. We learned that. Meaning that it doesn't have a phase of the vessel. There is no coarse light in it. That the record from expansion was lost, meaning the phase of the coarse light from that record, which is the eighth type of the record, but the refined light remained with no vessel. That ascended because of that above its vessel, meaning Yesod. We learn that the refined light of the record clothes in the coarse light of the record like the general direct light that clothes in the general reflected light. when both of them depart, meaning the direct light and the reflected light, records remained in both of them. Also, just as the direct light would clothe in the reflected light, also the record of direct light clothed in the record of reflected light. We find that Malchut doesn't have coarse light, which is called the last phase is lost. That's why the refined light of Malchut clothes in the vessel of Yesod, which is opposite of what we learned so far. First of all, what does he say? We learned that the direct light, the general direct light, clothes in the general reflected light. When both of them depart, starts from below, the reflected light departs, and the direct light departs. A record of the direct light remains, and a record of the reflected light remains. That's called the refined light in the record. That's called the coarse light in the record. Also, the refined light of the record clothes in the coarse light of the record. That's what we learned called the sixth type. Look in item 45. 47. In 47, the sixth type is the record that includes refined light and coarse light. One is clothed in the other. The seventh type is called the refined light. The eighth type is called the coarse light of the record. What's written here in 47 and 48? That they are connected together. Now, when he says that Malchut does not leave a record, meaning the light of Ab, the light of the female, we find, where's the refined light in the Malchut clothed? So he said that it remains in the vessel of Yesod. Look again, I'm going to repeat it. So 51, the ninth type, the record of the light of Malchut that the Ari mentions, know that this record is from the seventh type called the refined light, meaning that it has no discernment of a vessel. Why? That this record, as an extension called reflected light, was lost. Who was lost? Meaning the coarse light of this record, which is the eighth type of the record. But the refined type remained with no vessel, that ascended because of that above the vessel, meaning the Yesod. Is that clear? You can look at item 3. It's written like this. Item 3. When the light of Malchut rose to Yesod, it refined. The Yesod would illuminate in the vessel of Malchut through its posterior. We learned that a coupling was made at phase 3. What is the posterior? He said that Nekudot is posterior. Okay, so look in the inner light, he says, the Yesod illuminates in the vessel of Malchut through the posterior of Yesod, where all those 10 Sefirot of the direct light and reflected light, together they are posterior in judgment. Beyond that, you should understand that every light that descends from Yesod to the vessel of Malchut is entirely reflected light and has nothing of direct light. Okay. Since everything below Tabul is called reflected light, because the place of the coupling and the screen in the vessel of Yesod is phase 3, if it's phase 3, it's called the vessel of Tabul, where the screen of the Guf, that this screen detains the direct light, that it won't expand from it, from phase 3 and below. We find that everything that descends from Yesod to the vessel of Malchut is only reflected light and not direct light. That's what the Ari adds in the meaning of reflected light. So that's simple, it's not difficult. Let's keep going. And the reflected light that descends in the vessel of Malchut hits the light itself, the first light of Malchut that rises upward. What is he speaking about here, I'm asking? Which light itself that ascends upward? Here we're speaking when it ascended up. What ascends upward? No explanation. According to what's written here, in item 51, he explains. What does he explain? Look inside again. Do you see it? 51. The ninth type is the record of the light of Malchut that the Ari explains. And know that this record is the seventh type called the refined light. Part of the direct light, meaning that it has no vessel. Who is the vessel? The coarse light, that's what we learned. That part of the record of the direct light clothes in the part of the record of reflected light. Now it has no part of reflected light, so there's no record to clothe in. As was mentioned in 43, that the record of expansion was lost. So the coarse light of the record was lost with the A type of the record, but the refined light remained with no vessel. It has no part of the coarse light to clothe in. That's why it rose above its vessel, meaning to the Yesod. According to that, what's written here, you can explain that what it says above in the first line, that the reflected light that descends to the vessel of Malchut, the light that comes from the coupling on phase 3 called Yesod, wants to illuminate in the vessel of Malchut. It hits the light itself, the first light of Malchut that ascends upward in the refined vessel of Yesod, that came from the vessel of Keter, and striked each other. The sparks descended to the Kli of Malchut. In item 52, we're discussing the 10th type of the records. He says that the records are incorporated in a different screen after it refined. Until now, we learn that the light that was illuminating in the vessels departed, the records remained where they would shine. Now he says something new. 52. The 10th type of the records that were incorporated into the screen while ascending to the emanator, because the light of Malchut, that is the screen and reflected light in it, Malchut had no direct light. We learned that it refines and ascends from one phase to the next until it came to the emanator. Who is the emanator of the guf? Meaning to the peh of the rosh. And when they went through them, they were also incorporated in the 3 records that the light left there after their departure. According to that, when the screen with the records comes to the peh, it was incorporated from all 3 phases of the records where the new coupling took place. That came out of there, the vessels and the lights of the second expansion. What's written here in 52? He says, we have to discern more from the records that are incorporated in the screen. This means that first there was a coupling on Malchut, which is coarseness of phase 4. The screen refined, the light departed. Which light would the screen reveal? The light of the degree of Keter. Afterwards, it refined, and there was a coupling on the screen on the degree of Chokhmah. Afterwards, it refined on phase 2 and 1. Usually, we learn about 4 couplings. And if we say the last phase was lost, we find that the screen is incorporated from 3 records, so the screen ascended to the Rosh. That means you have to discern between what the light leaving a record in the vessels for the vessels themselves, that he calls them older vessels, as opposed to later when the new vessels come from the second Parzuf, that it came afterwards. And there's a screen that incorporates in those records, in 3 records. Why is the last phase lost? Because on that a new Parzuf will come, meaning that every new Parzuf is built from which records? Not from the records that remained in the vessels, but the records that remained in the screen that ascend to the Rosh and are incorporated in the coupling in the Rosh. It asks for a screen, a rejecting force, an overcoming force from the Rosh, and the Rosh gives it as much as it wants, according to the records that remained in it. That's why it divides, that there are older vessels and records that remained in the old vessels, and there's a screen and records that rise to the Rosh. And on those records, a new Parzuf is built and comes. Those records are considered the 10th type of the records. So you're asking me, what's the meaning, records that remained in the screen? So I'll tell you, we learn the screen. What is a screen? It made a calculation as much as it could aim in order to bestow, and received it. Afterwards, we discern from the screen that came out of the vessels, supposedly. So there's a screen which is root, and the screen and that intention that extends into the vessels. So let's say on the screen of phase 4, and that screen received the light in order to bestow on phase 4. The light departed. We say the last phase was lost, meaning we have to discern between two things: the light that it attained and the desire to bestow it attained. We say the desire to bestow, the force to overcome, that was lost, but not that it would illuminate. It lost. I said once in allegory, it's easy to remember allegories. So it was something that the Rav did. I said that there was an elder area here in Bnei Brak where they learned a song from the Zal. And elders who had reason in mind. I wanted a bit more. That they all won't be all elders. That there'll be livelihood there. So what I do, I ask them, what did you used to do when you were young?
I would go here and here and here. I cheated here and I cheated here, and who said that I was cheating? I was very rich. Well, he spoke. His face was overjoyed. He forgot that he was old. He was speaking about how he bought and made great profits and what pleasure he had. So I asked him, maybe today you also want to buy and sell and travel to so many places? I don't have the energy. You find that in the record, the pleasures remain, but the record from the work, he doesn't have. So, the rule is that the record of the light remains, but from the work, the power to overcome, it doesn't remain. The last phase is lost, does not refer to the pleasure, but to the light. This is called a record of clothing, how the light is clothed. This a person can remember what he had when he was young, the pleasures. And this he wants again. But work, he doesn't yearn for it. Why? He knows about himself that he does not have the strength to overcome. This is called the last phase of the extension. This is why I'm telling you, when he wants a screen, he has two things. He draws the light by overcoming and tastes the flavor in the light. The taste of the light means how the light is clothed in the vessel, so he tastes pleasure. And the taste of the work, this is regarded. That's why he says here, when he says here 3, why doesn't he say 4? So I'm explaining that the last phase is lost. He doesn't tell him, give me the overcoming again of phase 4. I don't have the energy. Give me the overcoming of 3 phases. You find that in the second degree, in the allegory, if we say first degree, for example, Patzuf Keter, let's say Patzuf Galgalta, So it says, give me a screen on the level of Chokhmah. You find that the whole construction of the second Parzuf is built on the records that there are in the screen. The screen rises. What does it mean that the screen rises? The power to overcome rises. To ask, give me the power to overcome, since without overcoming, meaning in order to bestow, you don't entertain anything. And that strength I don't have. It was refined for me, that strength. I lost that strength. Give me another force. But how much do you want? I can already see that I don't have as much as before. I don't have the energy for it. Give me a smaller strength. This is called 3 phases. But they say the clothing also remains. This is why we always learn. Let's say that when Parzuf Golgotha was refined, who had 4 coarseness of level 4, we say for coarseness of level 3 phases, and 4 of clothing. The light does not, we do not say that he departed. He wants the pleasure again. Student, specifically from the records of the extension, Rabash. Sorry. The records raise everything, whatever there is, both clothing and the coarseness. But we speak mainly, what does he want? The screen rises to receive the power to overcome. This is why we speak only of the screens, only of 3 phases. But in truth, clothing also rises. He's incorporated in this. Why should it not rise? What does it mean that it rises? The screen rises up. What do we say? From what is it incorporated? What does he remember? What does he want? So he says, only 3 phases I want. Why? He can see that he cannot overcome level 4. This is the meaning. There are only 3 phases of coarseness. But in clothing, there is also not. He's incorporated in it. And since we're speaking of a screen, and screen means overcoming the will to receive. And since the power to overcome is now weakened, so he says 3 phases. But clothing is also, we learned that there is there. But I explained why he says 3. Are we speaking about how much of a screen does he receive? There is no screen over 4. But we learn what is 4 of clothing, incorporated in 3 of coarseness. It gives us a degree. For example, if we say 4 of clothing, gives us vak of keter. This is 1. 2, it doesn't have expansion in the guf. When we say 2 of coarseness and 3 of clothing, he is a vak of chokhmah and does not have expansion in the guf. When we say 2 of coarseness and 1 of clothing and 1 of coarseness, he is vak of bina and no expansion in the guf. When we say 1 of clothing and root coarseness, we also learn here that the Ari says there 3 within 3, meaning the light of clothing is chagat, but he has no coarseness, no vessels. In what vessels does he clothe? In vessels of coarseness of only nehi, which is 3 in 3. Is it clear now? You're asking, the last phase is lost. What does it mean that the last phase is lost? So I'm asking, what is the last phase? And of course, 4 of coarseness. What is the last phase? The last phase means thus far. The degree says, thus far I want to receive, not more. If he had 4 of coarseness, then he says only up to 4, up to the level of keter, I want to receive and not more. If it's 3 of coarseness, if that were his last phase, thus far, not more, I cannot receive on 4. If he had 2 of coarseness, this is called his last phase. Thus far I can receive and not more. You find that the last phase means each one according to his own degree when he says thus far. So I cannot tell you if the last phase is called 4 or 3, but what? Since usually we say that in each degree we discern 4 phases, we should make 4 discernments of 4 in 4, 4 phases in 3, and 4 phases even in 1. I want to understand what is phase 4. For example, in Patzuf Ab, we learned that his level went out of phase 4. Here too, there will be Keter. Every degree has 4 phases. We say that all his 4 phases, what level are they? Level of Chokhmah. What is his last phase? The level of Chokhmah. He did not receive 4. If I say that his last phase is lost, no permission, he can no longer extend the level of Chokhmah. But the completely last phase is called the level of Bina. Why? Because the clash of inner and surrounding was in phase 3. It canceled phase 3 completely. Afterwards, no phase of Chokhmah emerged, only Bina. Moshe, previously I explained what it means that it's written that in the world of Nikudim there was a breaking. The Ari says there were great lights and small vessels, and the vessels could not tolerate the light. This is why they broke. Whereas in the world of Atzilut there was a correction. Small lights, big vessels. This is why they remained. Persisted. He has many explanations about that. Today I gave a small explanation. You should listen to it again. Great lights, small, there's already a language. Great light is called Gar, small light is called Vak. But what are big vessels and small vessels? If I say vessels means will to receive, then let's put it this way. In the world of Nikodim, there was a small will to receive. It was a breaking. Whereas in the world of Atzilut, there were big vessels, big will to receive, it remained. On the contrary. So we need to think, what are big vessels and what are small vessels? So I said simply, from which vessel can we receive the light? He comes and interprets for us this way. What are ta'amim, flavors, and what are dots? Nekudot. Ta'amim, taste, comes from the first expansion, the degree, the head of the degree, the top of the degree, and what you have in the Rosh, the top, later expands in the Guf, the body. Afterwards comes the clash of inner and surrounding, and revokes the screen. Meaning he cannot aim in order to bestow. The light departed. And this is called departure at once. There he says. He comes in inner light and says, why is it instantaneous departure? We learned that there was the coupling of Nekudot here. So he explains, in truth, the light departed. Why? Because it doesn't have the screen of phase 4. But since the screen consists of 4 phases, and as long as there is some screen, the light shines on the screen. Therefore, as long as there is a screen of 3 or 2 or 1, the light shines. It therefore follows. What is the vessel that receives the light? Not the coarseness, not the will to receive, but only as much as he can work in order to bestow, which is called a screen. So I already know what are big vessels. A big desire to bestow. Small vessels, small desire to bestow. Now, why am I saying that in the world of Nikodim there were small vessels? Answer. Since there was the second restriction, when they were permitted to use only vessels of bestowal. But afterwards, through the records of Zon of Ak, called 4/3 of coarseness, which need Chokhmah, this caused a coupling of Absag, which gave them the power of the screen to aim in order to bestow, just as Ab can receive in order to bestow. Likewise, he gave Nikudim that same strength, same power. And that was at the Rosh of the degree. And what there is in the Rosh later expands to the Guf. This is why the Guf too could receive in order to bestow. And since there is a rule, the light of Ab does not expand below Tabu, they lacked the power to work in order to bestow. This is called small vessels. What were they lacking? On the real will to receive, which is below the Tabu, meaning below the Parsa, called a place of Bia, vessels of reception. They had small vessels. They did not have a desire to bestow. Now, what is called big vessels in the world of Atzilut? They extended the light of Ab, which gives the power to bestow, which gives the power to overcome, which gives them a screen. On which will to receive? Only the incorporation of the will to receive. It's called not on the actual. This was not on the actual will to receive, but only an incorporation called raised achab. On that they were working. On the will to bestow, it's called big vessels. The screen was big over a small coarseness, only an incorporation of coarseness or the actual coarseness. This is what I wanted to interpret. Small lights in big vessels. Since they were not using the real coarseness. This is why it could only be from Vak of lights. And at the same time, the screen on the coupling of Absag extended on which vessels? On which coarseness? Only on the incorporation of the coarseness. This is called big vessels, meaning that desire to bestow was big on small coarseness of will to receive, only because of incorporation. I think this is a simple and easy to understand explanation. You understand the difference? Student was written in the N9, wasn't about the screen. I don't know what you said anymore. The 11th kind, he says, the records that remained of the 4 levels that emerged at the time of the refinement. What were we speaking about now, and what are we speaking about later? We learned in general that the Parzuf of Ta'amim was shining, and the light departed, and records remained in the vessels. Now he's saying something new. I'm returning to 53. 53. The 11th kind are the records that remained of the 4 levels that emerged during the refinement from the first 9 Sefirot in them. Since the Ari speaks here only of the records that remained of the first 9 of the first expansion, before he began to be refined, which is called the first light, as the Ari writes here. However, from the 4 levels that emerged afterwards during the refinement, they too left records in their vessels after they departed, meaning also from the first 9 Sefirot in them, since the last phase does not leave a record, as is known. Look, in chapter 3, item 8, means an inner light, item 8. It's written above in item 8. Look at 6. You find that when Keter went back up to the emanator before all the above Sefirot, that light that descends from the emanator to the Sefirah below from Keter, it is extended and passes through the posterior of Keter and is judgment. What does it say below? 8. Meaning because of the refinement of the screen from phase 4 to phase 3, where the reflected light rises from phase 3, does not reach clothing the light of Keter. Therefore, it rose back to its root, for there is no disclosure of light without a clothing of reflected light, as is known. That departure of the light of Keter is called the posterior of Keter, since anterior means bestowal and expansion, and posterior means departure from bestowal. Let's return to item 53. He says, the Ari speaks here of the Parzuf Te'amim, which he divides in the Parzuf Te'amim into the first 9 and Malchut, for Malchut does not leave a record. He comes and tells us that from the level of Nekudot, records remained as well, and there too he divides. However, from the 4 phases that emerged afterwards during the refinement, they too left records in their vessels after they departed, meaning also from the first 9 in them, 9 Sefirot in them, since the last phase does not leave a record, as is known in them too. In other words, if we say that the last phase of Malchut does not leave a record,